Right, let's start off as usual then. There's always any questions or requests, do make them known. So that's easy, gentle start. Use the movement just to give you a sense of where you are, if you like, how you're feeling and your energy levels and so on and so forth. But they're always very variable. I think the phrase is start where you are that I've come across. I think that's quite a good thing to think about. But gradually sort of move beyond that. Don't think, oh, I'm tired, therefore I can't do this or whatever. But just acknowledge whatever you're experiencing and come back to the standard things: posture, movement, rhythm, flow, those kind of things. Gradually, in ways that I now described to you, use images like moving through water and so on and so forth. Rebuild the sort of qualities that you're familiar with in your classes and your practice. Some things will come back. It's like if one of your issues have been just what is that knee supposed to do, or why isn't it doing what it's supposed to do, or whatever. They often reoccur, and they take time to deal with. I've described before sort of like the process I went through to sort out the alignment of my knees, for instance. I always feel that Tai Chi is not only something that is performed mostly slowly, but it's something that is learned and developed slowly. And for me, that pace is actually quite reassuring, to be able to sort of think, yeah, I'm on a path, or I'm in a process that is going to slowly give us a chance to develop, to go beyond where we are now. But it's not necessarily going to happen today or tomorrow, but there's time. So you like slightly forwards in your feet, and with your background and your experience, you are in a position to really focus that quite precisely. I sometimes talk about your weight 70% in the front half of your feet, but there's also this idea that the point in the sole of your foot, just behind the ball of your foot, on the center line of the foot, there's a little kind of hollow there. If you take a look sometime, have a little gentle poke around, called the bubbling well. It's an acupuncture point in the body, kidney 1, I think it is. Now, as a way of looking at posture, as a model to work with it, consider this. So imagine the line from the bubbling well on each foot going across, and that will be slightly forwards, of course. And then at the top of your head, just between the tips of the ears, again, there's a little hollow there. There's another acupuncture point called the meeting of ways, or the Raven's Peak. That represents the very top of the body. And if you were to take a line from that point down through the crown of your head, through your body to the ground, ideally it would intersect the horizontal line exactly halfway. So this is I mean, as I said before, there are no straight lines in the body, but this is like a kind of grid that you could put on a picture of your posture, and see how close you were getting to it. We can also imagine two other lines going down the side, shoulders to hips to ankles, and going across the body, and maybe across the hips, across the solar plexus, across the shoulders, giving us this kind of grid of squares. And so we begin to orientate ourselves somewhat alongside this non-existent model. And this is quite precise, of course. So it's something that we don't really necessarily consider in the first instance, but it's something that we can begin to build a kind of refining of our posture on. And just raise your arms. And let your hands drop down. So try and hold that image in your mind of the grid, and just going straight into the exercise routine down. We're not squeezing ourselves inside those squares, but the degree to which we move away from them is partially related to the elasticity of our body. And this is where, a degree of physical conditioning will come in. That elasticity is something that builds with the practice. A lot of it is in our muscles, our tendons, our ligaments, and the movements we do improve the supply of blood and energy to those areas, and that affects the condition of the tissue itself in one way or another. That grid also goes a little bit beyond us. So as I do this, it's not just the limit of the area that we're moving through is not defined by my skin, but this whole area around us, between my legs, behind me, in front of me, it's part of the environment through which we are moving. Remember to think about this feeling of your weight sinking down, and just observe how your body slowly settles into familiar patterns, familiar rhythms. And it may be that in the process of doing that, questions arise, or you think, well, that's interesting, that's happening, or you observe something. And this is all part and parcel of the ongoing development, that we don't have to try to make that happen. It's just a natural consequence. And just getting to a point where, by and large, within that environment of movement, the movement is flowing, unrestricted, and has a quality of harmony to it. If it helps you to bring your breathing in the way that I've described before, do that. Or you might prefer just to trust that your breathing is fine. Continue, not creating any problems for you. So there's a number of things running as a sort of background awareness that we can take and make use of for a period of time during the whole process, as well as in the front, be sort of like much more aware of the movements and so on and so forth. Referring back to those really basic things, basic ideas and principles regularly, you know, every few moments or every now and then. Just check your posture, for instance, check your root. But don't see it as a process that is constantly demanding that you have perfect posture. I'm not sure such a thing exists. I'm pretty certain that none of us have it for more than a few moments every now and then. And just see those moments when you do think, hey, that feels really good, or yeah, I've got that, as part of the sort of stack of achievements that we build through the development of the practice. And then wild goose. Now change into part in the clouds. As always, one of the very interesting things and very useful things to focus on is this resonance for each exercise within your body. Where do you feel your responses to the movements that we're making? Not necessarily the same each time you do an exercise. And where are the areas that aren't responding that you feel maybe would respond? So, for instance, here as I do this, if I were to notice, say, in my back somewhere, a kind of tightening as my arms came up, which can happen sometimes. One thing I might try and do is, as I come up, I get to that point where I feel the tightening. I make an extra little effort to release that area. I might, for instance, I'll exaggerate here. I go into this. You see, my posture's a bit. Oh, it's a bit tight. Well, maybe if I do this, I can release that. There's many options, and you use your awareness of your body and your movement that the practice helps you to develop as a sort of detective process, I suppose you could say. Now, changing, dragon plucks the stars from the sky. one of the things I like to do with this exercise sometimes, these days I tend to start off with, and you can see from the side, a distinct up and down movement in my hips, as with the previous 3 exercises. But then what I would do is gradually make those movements smaller until there is no external movement visible, or very little. But I arrive at this position with my hips just hanging back, and see if at this point I can feel the movement continuing within my body. If I can't, I'll move a little bit more and see at what point I can pick that up, and then maybe try and reduce it again, and so on and so forth. It's not a kind of ultimate process in that sense. But gradually shifting the initial focus of attention inwards rather than outwards. And then effectively, in my mind, rebuilding the movement. It's like, oh, so this is what I feel in my ribs, this is what I feel in my kidney, and so on and so forth. And trying to just use that awareness, that as an intent to imagine initially and eventually to produce that effect within my body, which then rebuild into the exterior movement. I call these classes Tai Chi and Qigong exercises. I'm sort of trying to cover all bases. I regard Qigong as an umbrella term, covering a range of practices. Tai Chi Chuan itself, is in that sense a style of Qigong, a form of Qigong. One which, unlike some others, and this is not criticism, but unlike some others, does have an exterior viewpoint as well as an interior viewpoint. Traditionally, that exterior viewpoint would come, of course, from the martial aspect, but it's not restricted to that. This leads us to a point where a statement I've seen on several occasions from traditional Chinese teachers, where they would simply say that Tai Chi is a high-level Qigong. I think this sense of being able to take our attention both within and around the body puts it into a kind of high-level category. One more time on each side. And before we move on, just standing for a moment, I'm going to come closer. This is something that I've touched on before. When I put one hand here on my belly and one hand on my solar plexus, when I turn from my hips, this happens. The two hands move together. And I'm doing quite a lot, and I'm sort of pulling on my legs a bit. I'm maybe pulling my knees out of line. But now, if I were to move and not create any pulling at all in my body, it would be a bit like this, hardly anything at all. And that, in a way, is the ideal. But now what I do is I do that, and both hands have moved. Now I turn a bit more in my solar plexus, and you'll see my top hand has moved a little bit beyond the bottom hand. So you can think of it in two stages: 1, 2. And then if I do the same thing here, I go 1, 2, and then 3, and I get a little bit more movement, and so on. And I could do that as many times as I wanted, up and down the body. This build up of the turn, stage by stage, level by level, through my body. So now going into pushing in 4 directions. The first movement is an extension upwards, which actually does help to open up your whole body. A sense of just the tightness draining away as you come back. As you push out and start to turn, it's belly, solar plexus, chest, or whichever way suits you to envisage this. There's nothing necessarily special about the belly and the solar plexus. It was just a convenient way of presenting that idea to you. And then at the end, we push out sideways and see if you can feel the same staged build up upwards through your body, finally reaching the palms of your hands. Weight still forwards in your feet, hips dropping back. Still, if it's helpful for you, that grid laid over your picture of your own body, keeping you orientated, both, if you like, within your body, but also within the space around you, and with the pull of gravity, of course. So we develop an ability to make quite subtly tricky exercises like the turn with our arms extended, without recreating tightness and stiffness. The sum total may mean you're not moving quite as much, but a lot of what you feel you might have lost will, over a period of time, come back. And then drop your hands down and circle out. Remember, still moving through water, or as though the air around you were thicker than normal. And then adding the turn, if it's comfortable. Same process of turning as I just outlined to you. And then switching. and add in the turn. Now this time, when you're going to row a boat in the middle of the lake, think about that center line hanging down from the top of your head on its journey down towards the center of your body. And what will happen here, and I've talked about these opposite movements before, the upper part of your body, shoulders and head, will move away from that center line. So will your hips, buttocks, lower back, and then they'll come back to it. But the center line will still be there. You can imagine it's still there, still going down towards the ground between your feet. Think of it as a post that a boat is tied to in the sea. And you move away from it, but there's still an attachment. And that attachment just quite naturally brings you back. So don't struggle to return. The cycle of the movement will bring you back. If you try to accelerate that, oh, I've got to go up, then things can start to go wrong. One of the things that is said about the Yin Yang principle, there are 5 sort of rules, as they're referred to, that govern the movement between the two halves. One of them being that yin will always change to yang, yang will always change to yin. And there's usually a point where that can happen smoothly. It doesn't, if you miss that point, it will still happen, but it's not necessarily going to happen smoothly. One more time. And then polishing the table. One more time. And stand. This awareness of the Yin Yang pattern, again, is something that is prominent in Tai Chi as a martial art, but it teaches us perhaps a way of relating to our external environment. More than anything else, it reminds me of crossing the road. If you ever walk down the pavement with a friend and you know you've got to cross the road, and actually you're talking to your friend and suddenly they're not there anymore because they've seen an appropriate space in which to cross the road, and you go to cross the road and you don't see that space. It's not there for you, but then you see a space later, and we don't think it through rationally. Don't think, oh right, there. But we're aware of how in the flow of events around us we can move through the situation, shall we say, without danger. And we start that off, as children. We learn, well, it wasn't the green protocol, whatever it was for me, I can't remember now, but there are routines and there are ways of approaching the road and being safe on the road, and we learn those, and through that we develop this kind of intuitive element. And there's a similar process, I think, with the practice of these exercises, that they encourage that awareness, and it becomes quite natural and intuitive to us. Now, just transferring your weight from side to side. Turning slightly, we're going to move into bear play. So make the movement a bit of a rolling, I'm exaggerating, a bit of a rolling movement here. It's like this. And again, if I exaggerate, see my hip goes up, my shoulder goes up. So I've got this lovely kind of circular pattern. It's on both sides, of course. And then the hands coming out. Now do one more on each side. So you could argue it's yang to yin, and at the bottom of this movement, you turn out. And that's the point of change. And then we change to hitting the board in front of the shoulder. So for the purpose of what I'm talking about, I'm going to describe the upward, outward expanding movement as yang. The returning movement is as yin. So the changeover point is here and here. In other words, when your arm is fully up and out and you turn, and here where your weight is 50% and your hands are on a level. I'm going to say in this situation, because yin yang shouldn't be regarded as fixed qualities. It's about relative connection, relative qualities. But for the moment, this is yang. and this is Yin. Feel how that is not just in your arms, but your back, your legs, the chest. That is often where we do find the common link between different interpretations of the term yin yang. So we want to make the change over to cow gazes at the moon. Here is probably not a good position to change over, nor is here. Again, here is not a particularly good position, nor is here. But this time, as you come to the middle here, that's a good position to change to cow gazes at the moon. Let's do one more at each side. And we're going to change to circling the ball. And then change in the same place. And then in the other direction again, same change in pace. One more time. Good. 1 foot forwards. Transferring your weight. That pattern of interchange between yin yang is, I suppose, in some ways the dominant kind of dynamic in Chinese medicine. It's also something that we can begin to recognize working around us and in our lives. You might, if you're busy with something, often there's a right or wrong moment to disengage from that and go and have a cup of tea or whatever it is you need to do to disengage. But similarly, there was also a time when you might re-engage with it. So an awareness of that model, and it is only a model, can actually be a kind of life tool, if you like, to help us to take, again, this awareness that we build within the practice beyond the realm of a kind of purely physical exercise, and really beyond the realm of a practice for calming the mind, for something that has uses, if you like, in lots of areas. Don't get stuck on any one. This is yin, this is yang. There are many shades of grey between the black and the white. But for instance, as we settle into the foot, that could be regarded as yin. But then that enables the beginning of the movement. We raise our toes. It enables the beginning of the movement of the step and then the heel. Remember, you're carrying that grid with you. So when we're in a parallel stance, I said that the center line of the body fell 50% between each leg. If I do what I've done before and demonstrate that with a pole, I'll do this from the side. You see here, when my feet are flat down, it doesn't quite reach the bubbling well. It goes from there to there to there. This is when I'm doing 60-40, but as I begin to raise my toes, it gets closer and closer. Not too far now. So, it's because I'm holding it. I can't actually put it through my body. So, and then when I finally get to here, now if it were going through my body, hopefully it would be straight down into there, and then it would all change again. So if you're looking to improve your stepping, that model and that idea of the center line and so on and so forth, all of that kind of stuff, may well be a useful thing to focus your attention on. Or, as I said, the yin yang interchange, or maybe both. And your other foot forwards. Now, of course, when we are doing this, this is all we're doing. This is all we have to do. We just concentrate on the movement. We pick a model, a way of looking at this that helps us. And we focus on that. We haven't got to bother about anything else. You're just raising your toes and your heel. But, you know, I can remember being taught to cross the road. You stop, you look, you listen, and that occupied your whole attention. You weren't even sure at first what you were stopping and looking and listening for. But now, I don't do that when I want to cross the road. I just turn around and I'm doing it, but I'm not having to stop and do it. So when you practice using these models, these ideas, it will gradually build into, as I say, a much more intuitive and a quicker process. And then stepping in. and then step in. Now going back or forward, depending on which way you went to start off with, of course. Oops. My little wobble there, which I'd like to claim was deliberate, but in fact wasn't. I came back here and there was a little kind of judder there, but I didn't even have to think about it. It was like, oh, there I am. The groundwork has been laid, if you like. The imagery has hardwired itself into my body. I remember somebody kept saying to me, one of my classes once, she said she's had a fall. Unfortunately, she hadn't hurt herself, but she said, she said, I tried to think about all the things that you said, but I couldn't. And well, of course you couldn't. I didn't say this, of course. I was very moved actually that she thought what I was teaching her was so important. But in that moment when you're about to fall, you're going to think, oh, hold on a second. Mike said if I imagine a grid and if I do this, or maybe this is yang, maybe I can come back to it's not going to happen. You're falling. It's too late. But it's the things that we do and that we have implanted in our kind of what I would think of as our subconscious that will help us at that point. Now have your right foot forwards, starting with bird folds its wings. And then fisherman cast the net. And pushing away. One more time. And then changing over. and then fisherman cast the net. And pushing away. And again, one more time. And bring your feet parallel. Give your legs a shake. Right. Open your hands together. Tapping over your face. Over your head and neck. To your shoulder. Your arm. Side. Onto your back. And around your hips. On your legs. Belly. The upper part of your chest. So, after a period of active exercise, the yin element, if you like, that brings us back and balances out the whole process is embrace tiger, return to the mountain. Again, you can come back, you could use that idea of the grid to help you to settle, you know, maybe something I've said has sparked off a line of thought, but you want to come back to the practice, you can follow that thought up later. Or whatever else I've offered in the past, or whatever else you've discovered through your practice that brings you to this point. And then sinking down and embrace tiger, return to mountain, which itself has qualities of the interchange between yin yang, and even as we go into the yang stage, if you like to think of it like that, the expanding stage, pull of gravity is still there. And if we follow the cycle, and if we resolve not to strain, not to fight, we will gradually find ourselves drawn back to the root, the mountain. One more time. and stand. Lovely. That went very quickly for me. I hope it didn't go too quick.